So the next motif I have to show you is the playing card motif. This one's done in size 15 seed beads. I've used the traditional black, white and red. It's done using Odd Count Peyote stitch, and I've got a new method of turning that I think you might find easier than the traditional Odd Count Peyote. It's not new, it's the first time we've shown it in a video. I originally found it on YouTube from somebody called Kelly Dale on Off the Beading Path, who's another YouTube beader. We'll pop a link in the comment box to their YouTube channel. I really like this method. It means that you don't get the stiff edge that you can sometimes get using traditional Odd Count Peyote. So that's something that's worth bearing in mind. So I've got a size 12 needle, a metre and a half of Nymo, and I'm just going to leave a tail. So I'm just going to hold the thread where you'd normally put a keeper bead. And to start with, for the first 2 rows, I'm going to pick up 11 beads. That's 11. Bring those down. And now we're going to start beading back across the row. And I'm going to put a white bead in every space bar the last but one space, which is going to have a black bead in it, which will be the first pip on the playing card. So pick up one and come through. And of course, the first row of peyote stitches all the way up. It's technically the third row of peyote stitches, always a bit fiddly. So just take your time with it. Keep everything pinched in your fingers, and it will stop the beads wobbling around all over the place. And come through. So this next space is going to have a black bead in it. Okay, and then this is where we do the new Odd Count Peyote turn. So I'm going to pick up the white bead that will be the bead that sits on the end of the row. And I'm going to come round under the tail thread, and I'm going to go back into the bead that we've just come out of, that we've just added. So you can see the thread is coming out of that bead there. I'm going to pull that up, and what that will do is it will bring the 2 beads on the end to sit next to one another. Be careful you don't pull your working thread too tight, because what we don't want to do is pull this tail thread through. You'll end up with like a little loop. We don't want that to happen. We need it to sit, these beads to sit side by side. So you need to just be aware of your tension. Don't work too tightly, don't work too loosely. And then we're just going to persuade this to sit in the correct direction. So we're going to come back through there and work the rest of the row as normal, because the thread ends up in the correct place to start adding this next row of beads. There we go, so that's coming across there, and then we'll pick up and come back and add a second row just in the white. And once I've done this, once you've got the first couple of rows added, it's much easier to see where you are with peyote, because it's a lot more stable, which I'm sure I say to you every time I film a video, but it's true. And again, to do the turn, we'll hold that bit of work in our fingers, pick up your bead, and we're going to go under the tail thread. Now, you can see I'm sliding my needle under the thread rather than poking through, because I want to avoid catching the thread. I don't want to pierce this tail thread. I just want to loop around it. And then we'll go back into that bead. And what you need to make sure here is that you're going back in. So you've come out of your bead this way and you're going back into it this way. Like so. And then I'll just add one more row of plain white peyote. And then one final row. And then we'll loop around that tail thread one last time. Come back. There. Just make sure it's nice and tight on the end. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to work back across this top row just to reinforce. Just tying a knot there where I don't want one, so just do that. And then I'm going to finish this thread end off. Now, rather than tying lots of knots, I'm actually just going to work down through a few beads on the side of the card. And then double back on my thread path. So you come back through where you've just come through, and back down again. And then trim that end off. And that's the first end finished. And then you can use the tail thread that you've got here to make the hanging loop if you want to. So this one has got 5 beads that just connect through that loop, and they've been reinforced a couple of times, and then the end's been finished off in the same way. The other thing you can do is you can actually stitch these one on top of the other like so and make a fan, a hand of cards. The other thing that I've done with this card here is I've actually made it double-sided, so that because obviously these would be no good to play with because you can see through, you can see the back of the card and the face of the card are the same because it's a single layer of peyote stitch. What I've done with this one is I've done a second, I've continued working through here. I've added 2 plain rows of white beads, and then I've added the pink with just a white bead on either edge, and then I've added another row of 2 rows of white beads to the bottom and stitched the work into a tube as if you were making a carrier bead, and then I've just whip stitched up the side of the bead to hold them closed so that the so that nothing moves. Now what I would do, I think, on this one is actually add an extra row of white to either side. There's just a little bit too much pink on the back of there for me, but that's me being particularly picky and critical of the work. So if I do this like that, you can see you can make a little fan of cards. You can have a tumbling selection of cards coming down like this as well. I'm going to just leave the tail thread attached to this one so that when we make the final piece, I've got a few options still with how I'm going to finish it off. So there we go. There's our little peyote stitch playing card.